Happy Easter. I'm Charlie Sykes, and Sunday Insight starts right now. Good morning. Welcome to Sunday Insight. In the week that was, now take a good look at those political ads, because after Tuesday, you're not going to see them again for a while. Topping Tuesday's ballot are race for the state Supreme Court, superintendent of public instruction, and a host of local races. In Milwaukee County, Judge Rebecca Bradley, the appointee of Governor Scott Walker, faces liberal challenger Janet Protasewicz. In Nozaki County, Judge Tom Wolfgram, who signed a Walker recall petition, is facing a challenge from lawyer Joe Voiland. A new study says that health claims in Wisconsin, costs that drive the cost of health insurance, could rise by an eye-popping 80% because of Obamacare. Marquette makes a run in the NCAA tournament. The stock market hits new highs, but new numbers show the economy is still barely growing. A bill is introduced in the state legislature that would kill that expensive 2-mile streetcar in downtown Milwaukee. And a special prosecutor decides not to issue criminal charges against police officers in the death of Derek Williams. But we start this morning with a fight over gay marriage.
This is not a Democratic issue or a Republican issue or conservative or liberal. This is an issue of American constitutional rights.
That it is impossible to know with any certainty the changes that would be worked on society by redefining a fundamental institution like marriage.
The Supreme Court heard 2 days of arguments over the constitutionality of bans on same-sex marriages. One case involves a referendum vote in California that banned gay marriage. The other case involves the Federal Defense of Marriage Act, which, among other things, denies federal benefits to gay couples. If the High Court decides that bans on gay marriage violate the Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. Constitution, it could invalidate the laws in 40 states, including Wisconsin, where the Constitution defines marriage as between a man and a woman. Polls show a marked shift in public opinion on the issue in favor of changing the definition of marriage. Now, joining me on our panel this morning, political strategist Linda Bruin, former state representative Michelle Litchens, the Milwaukee Community Journal's Michael Holt, and media trackers Brian Sikma. Well, let's start with this. What do you think the court should do in this case, Michelle Litchens?
The court should do nothing. I think we should learn our lesson from Roe versus Wade. Let the states decide. And if the states are going to change their mind, we have to let democracy work. Democracy isn't pretty, it can be very messy, but we don't want the court to dictate what states have already chosen to do. And if they want to change their mind, they can let democracy work.
Linda Bruin.
Well, my reaction is actually the complete opposite. I think the court does need to do what they did with Roe versus Wade and strike down the constitutionality of the federal law that denies benefits, as well as, actually what I think they might do at the state level is basically let the states decide for themselves. I think that, for me,
well,
that's
that would be
where
the
they
opposite
might.
of Roe versus
You're
Wade,
right.
though.
I know.
Okay.
I know.
Right.
I don't agree with that,
Okay.
but that might be where the compromise might be.
Because, I mean, if in fact they did the Roe versus Wade model, that would invalidate all of the state constitutions, would invalidate all of the referendums, and it would impose this as a civil right in every state in the country. And there would be some significant implications to that, wouldn't there be?
There would be tremendous implications for that right now. And I think what we have to understand as we look at this debate is that strong families and strong relationships are actually the foundation of building blocks of society. So we need to have strong traditional marriages. And people have argued, from even a conservative perspective, that we don't need to have government defining what marriage is. And I would argue that what we've seen in the Western judicial tradition, as we've seen it develop over time, is that the government has recognized what marriage is. And if people want to have relationships outside that, they're free to do that. We shouldn't be penalizing that as a government. But marriage has traditionally been defined by a higher moral law, and what we're seeing here at what federal law currently holds to, what the Wisconsin State Constitution holds to, is a recognition of that law. It's not actually government imposing its own definition.
Oh, okay, but how does the recognition of same-sex marriage, how does that in any way undermine traditional marriage?
Well, I think it goes back to what's the definition of marriage and what is the purpose of marriage? Is marriage just about two individuals having a relationship that is emotionally fulfilling to both of them? Or is marriage really that building block of society where we're going to have children that are coming along possibly, where they're going to be raised, where they're going to be taught and given the values of society?
Michael Holt,
it's a very awkward definition to define marriage because, I'm a Christian, so from a Christian perspective, we can say it's between a man and a woman. But then marriage goes beyond your religion. It's actually a civil contract between two people. I mean, you get married in the church, but you don't get divorced in the church. So, I mean, you have to, I guess the middle ground would be if you said we're going to allow for civil unions and then marriage at the same time.
You know, I used to be that way because I'm a Christian and I was raised with more of a traditional Christian definition of marriage. But, you know, I have 2 gay nephews. I'm a divorced woman, and I can tell you that the 2 gay guys that lived down the street had nothing to do with breaking up my heterosexual marriage. I don't buy the argument that somehow allowing people who are homosexual, gay or lesbian to marry somehow weakens a heterosexual traditional marriage. So for many years I was, you know, let's split the difference and call one a civil union, but I don't feel that way anymore. I think it is a right in our country, and it should be respected.
Even beyond that, I mean, really you can talk about do you support gay marriage or not? We have 40 states that made a decision on what they think is right, and if our Supreme Court decides to make the decision for us, we are going to go through more chaos down the road, just as we have through the abortion issue.
I agree, and I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think that you have to take an evolutionary approach. If people are going to change, if society is going to change its attitude toward marriage, it's going to take some time. We need to continue the debate that's ongoing right now. If you impose it by judicial fiat, you won't end the debate. It will be like the abortion debate. It will be all the more contentious. So I don't think they're going to do that. But I do think there's a possibility, likelihood they're going to strike down the Defense of Marriage Act, because there is that federalism issue that the federal government is now saying we'll let the states decide, but then we will ignore their decision, and there's a problem there.
I do think there's a problem there, and then the question comes up: by what basis do you begin to make judgment calls on this? And we saw that Justice Scalia talked about this, Chief Justice John Roberts talked about this. How once you decide that government's not going to respect what I would call the traditional definition of marriage, where do advocates draw the line in the next step? And that's really something that needs to be debated.
All right. Now, what has your glass half full, or what has your glass half empty? Let's go around the table. Linda Bruin.
Well, this is a completely lighter topic, but my glass is half empty because the Brewers are now ranked 22 out of 30 teams, and we all know that 2012 was a dismal year. But it's half full because opening day is just a few days away. The Miller Park roof is open, and I remember the magic of 2011.
Yeah, they better close it tomorrow. Michelle.
My glass is half full. I'm totally excited about Reince Priebus and the RNC's autopsy report. They have some great suggestions in there. But I'm kind of half empty because I'm wondering if all of the Republicans across the country are going to listen and heed their warnings.
Okay, Michael Holt.
Interesting article in the Journal was sent the other day by Tyrone Dumas, who said he should everybody should applaud all this construction at the lakefront and downtown, but it's half empty because there's no efforts for inclusion.
Brian Sickma.
Well, my glass is half full because 43 school districts across the state of Wisconsin are actually trying to raise taxes. But the good news is voters have to vote on that. It's half empty because a lot of voters don't know if their district is one of them. The MacGyver Institute has a great report out talking about which school districts will be voting on Tuesday to raise taxes. Take a look at it when you get a chance.
Well, my glass is half empty because March turns out to be one of the coldest months on record. It's half full because it's over. Tomorrow is April 1st and it's opening day. Next on Sunday Insight, a special prosecutor decides not to charge 3 Milwaukee police officers in the death of a man in their custody. And as we go to break, Governor Scott Walker decides to write a book. Does that mean he's decided to run for president? Well, we asked him.
I love being governor. I had to work pretty hard the last 2 years. In fact, by next year's election, I'll run 3 times in 4 years. I'm pretty satisfied being governor.
No charges in the death of Derek Williams in police custody. Now, despite an inquest jury recommendation that 3 Milwaukee police officers face criminal charges for failing to render aid to Williams, Special Prosecutor John Franke decided last week not to issue charges. Franke decided that he would be unable to prove those charges beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. Now, that decision disappointed family members, but the door is still open for civil lawsuits and a federal investigation. So, Michael Holt, did Judge Franke make the right decision?
No, he didn't. You know, I heard you on the radio, I think it was Wednesday, and you didn't take calls. It was the last few minutes of this show, and you said these charges could permanently scar these police officers. Let's be honest. We're talking about misdemeanors. We're talking about what is equal to getting some parking tickets. Is it worth forcing this ongoing scenario where there never seems to be any justice for black folks just because somebody might get a misdemeanor?
Well, I mean, a misdemeanor is a criminal charge, and I guess the question is...
They would not be fired. They would probably not even be disciplined.
Are you kidding me?
Fired for a misdemeanor?
Yeah, for felony misdemeanor? You betcha.
Absolutely.
They lose their pensions, they lose everything.
But I guess here's the point, and we've talked about this before. There is no one thinks this was handled well. Nobody would deny that this was a tragedy. But To charge somebody criminally is very different from recognizing that, okay, we had a training problem, that maybe you could second guess them. Did they intentionally want to harm Derek Williams?
No, but see, that's not really the way the law was written. Spencer Connors wrote this law, you know, like 20, 30 years ago, and I remember the uproar around the community around there. Yeah, it was about Ernie Lacy. And they've actually changed the intent of the law. So it's not necessarily whether or not I intended to do you bodily harm, but did I, for what other reason, sit there and watch you for 8 minutes squirm, your eyes roll back, you pass out, and you did nothing?
Well, except
8 minutes.
All right, and then you gave mouth-to-mouth resuscitation without using the shield at all. So not only did they not do nothing, they did something at significant risk to themselves. Michelle Litchfield.
That's exactly right. I think Judge Franke made the right decision. It's sad. I mean, everything that happened is sad. But I don't believe that they could prove that these officers criminally intended to let this person suffer.
They should have at least allowed a jury.
But they also
the inquest
still
jury
actually be
said it should be
disciplined.
charged. So at least put it in the court of law.
But Michael, if you watch that tape, which I did, you want someone to pay. So if I was on that jury, I would go into that jury wanting someone to pay. But the minute you find out that that officer did CPR and didn't stop and put himself at risk, that negates the whole issue of intent. And that's where Franke went with it. But he's saying the law, he's interpreting the law different than you. He's saying that the law says you have to have intent to cause that harm and to withhold care.
This whole situation is very unfortunate because obviously I think these police officers are, they do regret their actions. This was not some premeditated act. It was not an act of intentional carelessness. As we've seen, they did take steps to try to resolve the situation. Do they need better training? Yes. But this isn't something that we should be constantly trying to open up and litigate through this process now. It would be good to put it behind us. They certainly, apologized for what happened and institute better training practices.
What better training? I mean, that's what I'm confused about. What better training? I would venture to guess if any of us were sitting in the front seat of that car, it would not have taken us 8 minutes to make a decision that lets you know something.
We're not used to people crying wolf. We are not used to people over and over again crying wolf. And that's what.
So you assume anybody who's crying wolf?
Here's my question. We've now had this particular case reviewed by the police department itself, its own internal affairs division. They decided nothing was wrong. It was reviewed by District Attorney John Chisholm's office. They reviewed it, they looked at the tape, they decided that there was no criminal misconduct. The newspaper gets a hold of it, the videotape is up there. Now we've had an inquest jury, we've had a special prosecutor. He's decided that he's not going to issue any charges. When will this ever come to closure, or is there going to be a political demand that there be heads on a stick? I don't know. Well, let's give out some unsolicited advice. Linda Bruin.
Well, a few weeks ago, the RNC sent out a request to their lawmakers and candidates for them to kind of soften their language about Hispanics, hoping to win over the Hispanic vote. But on Thursday, Alaska Republican Representative Don Young called Hispanic Americans wetbacks. So my advice to the RNC is that it's bad enough that you have to ask your people not to make racist comments, and it's even worse when they don't follow your advice.
Michelle Litchfield.
Reince Priebus, listen to the autopsy report and go on the Colbert Report.
Okay.
Wow. Given Marquette's basketball season, I think Marquette, particularly the athletic director, should look at giving Buzz Williams a raise, because I don't think he's going to be here long.
Okay, Brian Sigma.
Well, a Wall Street Journal article this week pointed out that blue states are currently losing job creators. People are leaving those states, voting with their feet because of higher taxes and new regulations, including states where they're leaving are places like Minnesota and Illinois. Well, to job creators in those states, we'd welcome you to Wisconsin. We're going to cut taxes, we've got a balanced budget, and we're going to reduce regulation. So welcome aboard if you come.
Okay, and I'm sorry to mention this on Easter Sunday, but on Friday, on Good Friday, we learned that a Shorewood artist who has created a picture of the Pope Emeritus Benedict using 17,000 condoms is moving up the display. Here's my unsolicited advice. It's not edgy, it's not gutsy, it is not brave, it is lame, it is uncreative. Next time, try some real art. Next on Sunday Insight, Tuesday's Election Day. We'll talk about the big races that you will help decide. We welcome the Easter Bunny, but Puxatawny Phil, not so much. Well, prosecutors this week considered indicting the groundhog on fraud charges. The punk predicted an early spring. We know how that worked out. He might get a pardon. His handler volunteered to take the fall, claiming that he just misinterpreted Phil's prediction. I'm not buying that. Well, another Tuesday, another election. This has been a relatively low-profile affair as these things go, so let's get right to it. State Supreme Court Justice Pat Roggensack faces law professor Ed Falone. 2 years ago, the race between Justice David Prosser and Joan Kloppenberg was decided by just 7,000 votes. Is this going to be a replay, or is it different, Brian Sigma?
I do think the margin is going to be bigger because people understand that Ed Falone has zero experience as a judge. He's never served a day in his life as a judge. And I think Patience Roggensack is someone who's not kind of the lightning rod personality. She's actually going out there. She's campaigning. People like her demeanor. They like her style. I think she's going to win that race. I'm very fascinated to see what's going to happen here in Milwaukee County.
Okay, what do you think, Linda Bruin?
Well, I like Ed Falone because I do think he's a person of intelligence and integrity, but I don't think he's going to have a chance of beating Pat Roggensack. I think she's going to get 70% or more of the vote.
Oh, I don't think she's going to get that many. What do you think?
I think one thing that we've learned with this election cycle is that if you signed those recall petitions at some point in time in your life and you want to run in a nonpartisan race, it's not going to work in a conservative county. So I think that's what we're going to see happen.
Okay, you're talking about Judge Wolfram, though.
I am.
Okay,
well, not only that, I think that's word to everyone out there who signed those recall petitions. Watch out.
Okay, Michael.
Are there nonpartisan judicial races?
I just don't sense the kind of buzz and the kind of interest in this election, although the stakes are just as big.
Liberals are not going to come out.
Why not?
Because they don't see him winning.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And I agree. She's going to win by like 60-something.
Well, you know, the thing about it, Ed Falone has run on only one thing, the dysfunction on the court. Well, here's a problem about that. The dysfunction is not Pat Roggensack. So he's trying to, in effect, I'm trying to come up with an analogy of why this isn't working. It would be like Brian Sigma and I getting into a fight and then using that as an argument to fire Linda Bruin from the panel. I mean, and that's why it is just not playing. Okay, State Superintendent of Public Instruction.
Oh, Tony Evers has it hands down.
Yeah, but how much?
Evers is going to get probably 75, 80%.
What do you think?
Evers will get 65%.
That could happen.
Over 70%.
Yeah, this is a huge missed opportunity. The governor is trying to have a debate about the future of education reform and school choice, and it is a real, I think, just a disappointment that there was not a stronger conservative candidate in that particular race.
I just think we've gone back to the way things used to be. I mean, I know we don't remember that anymore. We're used to the blue fist and the drums banging all over the place, but people are, going back to really not paying attention to some of those larger races.
Okay, is what they said this week the same thing as what you heard? Let's go around the table. Linda Bruin.
Well, the Supreme Court Justice Scalia last week said that sociologists in this country were widely divided over whether children are harmed by being raised in single-sex families. And what I heard was a man whose bigotry and homophobia overshadowed the absolute incontrovertible facts, which is that the American Sociological Association, the American Psychological Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the American Medical Association all agree that there's no additional harm to the child by being raised in a same-sex family.
Okay, Michelle Litchens.
I think what we all heard was your health insurance rates aren't going to go up and you can keep your same plan. But I think what we heard this week was your health insurance rates are going to go up 30 to 80% in the state of Wisconsin, and you cannot keep your same plan.
Yeah, Michael Holt.
Well, I had something else, but hearing the governor a couple of minutes ago talking about he was happy to be governor when I asked would he run for president, what I actually heard was I'm waiting for them to draft me.
Okay, Brian Sigma.
Well, Democrat lawmakers this week attacked a career appointee over at the Wisconsin Department of Labor who was presenting the fact that jobs numbers have to be revised in Wisconsin. Well, when they said that, those Democrat lawmakers didn't seem to realize that the state's top economist got his job under Jim Doyle. So are they attacking Jim Doyle now for the state of jobs in Wisconsin?
Yeah, well, speaking of jobs in Wisconsin, what they said, the Greater Milwaukee Committee said that it was pushing this economic development breakthrough plan, big banner headline. What I heard was the plan was to hire a consultant. That's it, hire a consultant. They could have saved a lot of money by just appointing a blue ribbon task force. Next on Sunday Inside, our panel picks the winners and losers of the week. But first, here's your morning news update. It's time for our panel to pick the winners and losers of the week. Linda Bruin, you're first.
My loser is Madison's Freedom from Religion Foundation. In March, they sued the U.S. Treasury to get the words "In God We Trust" removed from our currency, threatened to sue one town for having a cross on a 40-year-old veterans memorial and another town for opening their meetings with prayer, and they gave 2 local students scholarships for getting Shorewood High School to remove a cross from their football team's logo. My response to all of this is Happy Easter and happy March and April holy days to people of the Jewish, Hindu, Sikh, Baha'i, Buddhist, and Jain religions.
Michelle Michelle Litchens.
My winner is Senator Ron Johnson for creating his Victims of Government project. I encourage you to visit the YouTube and watch his first video. We need to share stories of average Americans who are harmed by a government bureaucracy out of control. Great idea, Senator. My losers, President Obama and Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel. A Syracuse University report said Chicago was 90th, dead last in the country for federal gun law enforcement at a time when gun crime is out of control in Chicago. The president and mayor continue to lobby for more gun laws. Fellas, stop running your mouth for the cameras and start enforcing the laws on the books.
Michael Hull.
Well, since folks say I'm a little too negative recently, I'm going to do two winners. One, Indiana Supreme Court, which actually put children before partisan politics and affirmed the constitutionality of the school choice program there. My other winner this week is the Milwaukee County Sheriff, who performed CPR on a young child and saved his life.
Brian Sickma.
Well, this Easter morning, remember the fact that nearly 2,000 years ago, Christ, God in human flesh, rose from the dead, and according to the Apostle Matthew's account, the angel declared to those seeking Christ's body on this very morning, he is not here, for he is risen. May today be a day where we reflect on all that Christ has done for each one of us, and happy Easter to each one of you.
Well, that's a tough one to follow there. My loser, Tom Barrett's downtown streetcar, a new bill proposed by State Representative Dale Koinga, would make Barrett own the cost of uprooting tens of millions of dollars of utility infrastructure. That might be enough to kill this expensive boondoggle once and for all. Winners, anybody who pays electric bills. If that bill passes, you won't get stuck with the extra cost for the trolley folly. Thanks for joining us. Have a wonderful Easter. And remember to join me for my radio show on News Radio 620 WTMJ from 8:30 until noon. Have a great week.